Dear friends in Christ, before we entered the church today, we first heard the account of Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, and he appears to be arriving in triumph, praised by the crowds. And he enters the city of David, the city of kings and the center of Judaism, where the temple of the Jews is located, the central location of Jewish worship. And the temple, of course, is where Jewish priests had for centuries been offering sacrifices, animal sacrifices, in atonement for sins. Jesus, however, comes to Jerusalem to make the ultimate sacrifice, which will render temple sacrifice obsolete. And it's interesting that within 40 years of his death, the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, bringing an end to temple sacrifice once and for all. And Jesus' arrival unsettles the people of Jerusalem. Perhaps they've heard a little bit already about Jesus and are wondering if he is in fact the long-awaited Messiah. Or perhaps their agitation has political overtones. Will Jesus, for example, threaten the power of the Romans who occupy the city? But as we know, Jesus' kingship was not that of an earthly king. Jesus' kingship is rather expressed through his sacrifice, by laying down his life, making the ultimate sacrifice for his people. And so Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem changes quickly, and our first and second readings indicate the suffering that awaited him. The first reading from Isaiah is about the so-called suffering servant of God, a mysterious figure who submits to beatings and abuse as a part of God's will. And the second reading from St. Paul speaks of how Jesus emptied himself completely for our sake, first by becoming man, and then by permitting his own creatures to put him to death. And then we hear the gospel account from Matthew of Jesus' betrayal by one of his close followers, of his suffering and his death on the cross. And we're left, in a sense, at the end of this account in darkness. And we all experience periods of darkness in our lives when we cannot see what is coming next. And of course, we never really know what's coming next in our lives, but there are certain times in life that are particularly uncertain or unsettling, when it's hard to see the way ahead. And sometimes it may seem like the darkness will never end and that there is no hope. And Jesus' death on the cross appeared to be a defeat, the ultimate defeat. His enemies had vanquished him. It appeared that evil had triumphed. Whatever the darkness may be in our own lives, we know how this story ends. Ultimately, Jesus triumphs. He rises from the dead. And Jesus' resurrection gives us the hope that the darkness in our lives will one day vanish before the light of a new day, in which Jesus will cast out all darkness and all uncertainty. And though we experience darkness, and at some point in our lives we all do, a darkness that Jesus himself entered into for our sake, we believe that if we have faith in him, Jesus will ultimately vanquish this darkness. So this week, I encourage you to think of the people in your life who might be struggling with something, who might be going through darkness. Talk to that person and especially listen, and give that person an opportunity to share with you what he or she may be going through. And in doing so, you can share the hope that Jesus gives us.